You probably know someone who took Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, or at least saw one of those before and after photos online. But what if I told you that between 2022 and 2023, there were an estimated 24,499 emergency department visits tied to semaglutide-era drugs, and that those visits helped spark one of the fastest growing mass tort campaigns in US history? Stick around, because in the next 12 minutes, I'll take you inside the courtrooms, the science, and the legal playbook that could reshape how these drugs are made, labeled, and prescribed. Welcome back to Shadow Docket Courtroom Files. I'm your host. Today we're unpacking the GLP-1 litigation wave, who's suing, why, and what this means for millions of patients and the drug companies. This is an educational overview, not legal advice. If you have a case-specific question, consult a licensed attorney. Now, I'll promise you this. By the end of this episode, you'll understand the science signals plaintiffs' lawyers are leaning on, how they're turning those signals into mass tort strategy, and why 2026 might be the year the first big trials change the landscape. First, a quick primer. GLP-1 receptor agonists are a class of medications that mimic a gut hormone to help control blood sugar and suppress appetite. Brands like Ozempic, Wegovy, and oral formulations have been used for diabetes and weight management. Between 2021 and 2023, prescriptions for semaglutide class drugs soared. One estimate cited a 442% increase in fills from January 2021 to December 2023. That explosive demand is the backdrop for everything that follows. Pause, here's the twist. With tens of millions of patient exposures, some estimates noting more than 5 million patients received semaglutide class prescriptions in 2023. Even rare side effects become raw numbers. That's the mathematical engine behind mass torts. Rare event times huge exposed population equals many affected individuals. And that math is what drove clinicians, regulators, and eventually plaintiffs' lawyers to pay attention. Okay, so what did the data show? A CDC-led analysis using the NEISS CADES emergency surveillance system estimated roughly 24,499 emergency department visits potentially attributable to semaglutide products between January 1, 2022 and 31 December 2023. Approximately 82% of those visits occurred in 2023. The most common complaints were gastrointestinal, severe nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, but the dataset also captured hospitalizations, hypoglycemia, and pancreatitis. But here's the thing. There was also a vision signal. A July 2024 JAMA Ophthalmology study, a matched cohort of about 16,827 patients, reported higher relative risks of non-arteritic anterior ischemic optic neuropathy, or NAION, in patients prescribed semaglutide. The reported hazard ratios were striking, roughly 4.3 inches at type 2 diabetes cohort and 7.6 inches in overweight or obese cohort in that single center analysis. Those relative risks are large, but remember, they describe a rare event, so absolute numbers remain small. Now, stop and think about this. Regulators and the scientific community treat these as signals, not definitive proof. The European Medicines Agency and the World Health Organization opened reviews, and some jurisdictions updated label language around gastroparesis or recommended caution. The FDA also targeted unapproved online sellers of compounded semaglutide and tirzepatide, issuing warning letters in December 2024. So how do plaintiffs' lawyers build mass tort cases from surveillance signals and scattered studies? The playbook is a mix of scale and medical rigor. First, intake at scale. Law firms signed up thousands of potential clients and centralized claims into a federal multidistrict litigation, MDL No. 3094, created in February 2024 inches, the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, for primarily gastrointestinal injury claims. Judge Karen S. Marston has overseen early case management orders and the appointment of plaintiff-led counsel. But scale alone isn't enough. Plaintiffs pair high-volume intake with detailed medical record review. They're looking for objective diagnostics, gastric emptying studies for gastroparesis, imaging for intestinal obstruction, ophthalmologic records for NAION with visual field testing and optic nerve head exams. They also hire epidemiologists and specialty experts, the same disciplines that generated those early signals, to try to connect the drug to the injury in a way that can survive expert scrutiny at trial. What does a hazard ratio of 7.6 actually mean for you? It means the study observed a higher relative risk in that cohort. But translating population-level associations to an individual plaintiff requires medical records that show timing, objective tests, and reasonable exclusion of other causes. That's the heavy lift in these cases. Manufacturers aren't standing still. Defendants emphasize randomized clinical trial data and long histories of regulatory review, showing that many adverse events, especially GI side effects, were known and described in prescribing information. They argue alternative causes, underlying vascular disease for NAION, gallbladder disease and weight loss-related changes for cholecystitis, or pre-existing diabetes complications. They'll also draw a line between FDA-approved products and unapproved compounded formulations sold online. Pause, here's the contest. Discovery is where the real fight happens. Plaintiffs want internal safety assessments, post-market surveillance reports, marketing materials, the documents that could show whether companies knew more than they disclosed, or whether promotional strategies encouraged off-label or cosmetic uses. That kind of material can change a narrative in public view, and discovery is happening right now. So what did the courts do? The JPML consolidated GI claims into MDL No, 3,094 inches, the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. By late 2025, reported MDL case counts climbed from hundreds to roughly 2,800 to 2,900 cases in public trackers. Courts and counsel have also talked about separating injury types. Why? Because GI injuries and vision or NAION claims rely on different diagnostics, different experts, and different causation theories. Splitting them allows focused discovery and cleaner bellwether selections. Bellwethers are mini trials. Plaintiffs and defense pick representative cases, try them, and use results to gauge strengths and potential settlement values. Court schedules and expert discovery deadlines set in late 2025 point to bellwether trials in 2026. If a bellwether goes to a jury and results in a major verdict, that can rapidly change settlement dynamics or lead to dispositive rulings that reshape the whole MDL. This next piece is crucial. Not all products implicated are identical. The litigation and regulatory activity highlight an important distinction: FDA-approved brand products versus unapproved compounded semaglutide and tirzepatide sold via online telehealth prescribers and compounding pharmacies. The FDA sent warning letters to several online vendors in December 2024 for selling unapproved versions. Manufacturers have also filed suits against some compounding sellers. Why should you care? Because causation can hinge on product source. Compounded formulations may have variable dosing, purity, or lack the safety data tied to brand formulations. Plaintiffs' lawyers often bring claims against both manufacturers and compounding vendors to cover their bases and to use vendor contracts and communications as another avenue for discovery into how these drugs were promoted, distributed. Here's where the rubber meets the road. In mass torts, plaintiffs must prove elements like exposure, that the product can cause the injury, and that it did cause the injury in the individual plaintiff, often through expert testimony. Epidemiologic studies give population-level associations. Clinical records show individual harm, but courts want both: plausible mechanisms, consistent timing after exposure, objective tests, and exclusion of alternative causes. Now stop and think about this. A study showing a higher relative risk, like the JAMA Ophthalmology NAION findings, is powerful but not dispositive for an individual case. Plaintiffs must tie that population signal to the person in the courtroom. Defense experts counter with baseline risks, pre-existing conditions, and trial-grade critiques of observational studies. That's why cases with strong, objective medical records and clear timelines are prime bellwether picks. So if the science is mixed, why is this litigation moving so fast, and why should patients and doctors pay attention? The answer lies in real-world stakes.